Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. Neo Chien smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. I just need to know how you feel about the process. The empires on the continent know about this problem, but no one is controlling it. They aren't able to. After all, the empires compete with one another, and soul masters are powerful weapons in their arsenal. Who would be willing to give them up? We hope to find something to replace soul rings, or to reduce our need for soul masters. If we can do either, it'll be very beneficial for the ecological balance of the continent and the continuation of soul masters." Hou Yuhao was awed. "You're absolutely right. I've also considered this problem. Our teachers at Shrek Academy have also taught us about this. We need to avoid killing soul beasts unnecessarily, and only kill those that are suitable for us. However, soul beasts are innately aggressive. Once they are attacked, they will retaliate. All right, I promise you. If the soul beast embryo changes, I will report the changes to you. However, please keep this a secret for me too." Neo Chien nodded satisfactorily and said, "You can be assured of that. We don't even leave Clear Sky Castle." Hou Yuhao stood up and said, "It is late. I shall not disturb either of you any longer. Uncle Neo, thanks for healing me. If I was left to recuperate on my own, it would have taken me more than just a few years." Neo Chien waved his hand and said, "Go. The path of cultivation lies in perseverance." Hou Yuhao returned to his room. Neo Chien turned around to face Titan and said, "Second brother, what do you think?" He replied, "I guess it's fine. He is indeed extraordinary after all. Furthermore, I can tell that his brotherly ties with Wang Dong are real. However, he's quite dumb." Neo Chien laughed. "You can't blame him either. First impressions count. In addition, he's still young. I sensed his spiritual seed just now. It's really quite impressive. Before it was damaged, it had reached the level of 100,000-year soul beast. His control of it is also very strong. The only thing was that his own abilities hadn't reached that level yet, thus he was unable to fully use his spiritual power." Titan said, "Wang Dong is really brazen. He actually." Neo Chien gestured and said, "Forget it. There's no point in telling him about it now. I also believe that Wang Dong knows his limits. Besides, no one can really get close to him. Did you forget?" As he spoke, he pointed to his forehead. Titan seemed to be reminded of something. "Oh yes? I completely forgot about that. Hou Yuhao has passed the first round. However, we'll need to observe him more." Neo Chien said, "Let's not interfere in Wang Dong's matters too much. Yuhao's abilities are decent indeed. If he develops further like this, it wouldn't take him long to catch up to Wang Dong. For them to exhibit for martial fusion soul skills, it's already a form of fate." Neo Chien's expression suddenly changed while they spoke. He was stunned as he said, "This fast? Second brother, go quickly. Yuhao's soul beast embryo is about to be born." As he spoke, he was already bursting out. "Yes?" Not long after Hou Yuhao returned to his room and started to cultivate, he felt an intense dizzy feeling swarming his mind. He started to stagger and quickly sat on his bed before focusing his spiritual power to see what was going on. Within his spiritual power was surging, and a wave of strange aura was undulating. The second mental sea, the Eye of Destiny. Hou Yuhao soon found the origin of this weird aura. He discovered that the Snow Empress embryo was squirming in his Eye of Destiny. A human infant subtly appeared and extended its hands and legs, wanting to break free from the restraint of the embryo. The Snow Empress embryo's movement sparked the surge of spiritual power in his second mental sea. His spiritual sea resonated strongly with his second mental sea at this point. It was about to come out? Hou Yuhao was feeling very uncomfortable with regards to spirit. That was because spirit was a special life form created by him, the Ice Empress, Sky Dream, the Snow Empress and the deceased Electrolux. Hou Yuhao could clearly sense that his spiritual power was greatly affected as spirit moved. It was as if all his focus and attention were completely drawn away by it. From the memories Electrolux left behind for him, this was mainly due to the contract that they had. They were also related by blood. The formation of spirit was accomplished from the shrinkage of the Snow Empress' immense origin power and spiritual sense, as well as Hou Yuhao's blood and spiritual power, which were all fused by the flame of Electrolux's divine sense. Electrolux told Hui Yuhao through the experiences that he left for him that he could use contract magic on soul beasts. But it was up to him to learn how, and under what conditions. Simply put, the greater the gap between a soul master and a soul beast, the higher the possibility of fulfilling the contract. Hui Yuhao had to find out whether the soul beasts could retain some level of intelligence and abilities on his own, as well as if they could become the soul rings of soul masters. The Snow Empress situation was very special. Due to her strength and the terrifying changes involved, the flame of Electrolux's divine sense had been extinguished. Electrolux had also told Hui Yuhao that he could fulfill the contract with his current spiritual power. That was why Hui Yuhao felt extremely excited even though he was uncomfortable. He was also very curious. The movements of the embryo became even more intense. Hui Yuhao's spiritual power started to gather towards his second mental sea, and the embryo seemed to feed on his spiritual power. It was engulfing and swallowing it. She's not coming out? She's only helping me cultivate my spiritual power? Hui Yuhao was a little perplexed. However, he hoped that his spiritual power would continue to be restored like this. With the current pace, he could reach the boundless state that he was in before the snow pearl combusted. Time passed second by second. As the halo expanded, the orange color of the embryo also became increasingly intense. Hui Yuhao was completely unable to see what was going on in the embryo anymore. It was like an orange-gold egg now, and stopped transforming into other things. It stabilized on this egg-like form and seemed to have solidified. Hui Yuhao's spiritual sea continued to be nourished more and more. A dim layer of orange surrounded it now, and the boundless ocean was back. He even felt that his spiritual power was a bit stronger than before, as if it were probing its way into the next level. It didn't just cause waves in his spiritual sea, it was combining with his soul power too. As they fused together, he seemed to understand the level that Uncle Niu Qian was in. Although it was still very far away, he appeared to have seen the gateway to this level through this opportunity. The orange-gold eggshell became smaller and smaller, and the small being in the shell was revealed. She was a small infant, a complexion as tender and white as her chubby hand. She looked just like a month-old baby, her tiny face extremely chubby. Dim orange-gold light shone from her body. As she munched on the eggshell, she would even occasionally smile sweetly. Her dimples made her look even cuter. Her eyes were a deep blue, as moving as a vast ocean at its deepest end. Pure and deep were descriptive words that shouldn't appear together, but they described her eyes perfectly. Her silvery white hair had slight curls. Even though she was very young, she had a sense of elegance. Snow Empress. Hui Yuhao called to her with his spiritual power. The infant girl's action slowed for half a second. After that, she quickly stuffed a piece of eggshell into her mouth. Her deep blue eyes revealed a slight look of confusion and pensiveness. She was extremely cute, and Hui Yuhao was very tempted to pinch her chubby cheeks. Snow Empress? Hui Yuhao called out again. After that, he immediately gathered his spiritual power and projected a form of himself into his second mental sea in front of the girl. She continued to chew on the eggshell as she watched Hui Yuhao, her eyes wide open. Her long eyelashes were deep blue, and they seemed to be fanning the air as she blinked her eyes. Snow Empress, do you still remember me? Hui Yuhao asked again. She continued munching on the eggshell. Snow Empress, I'm Hui Yuhao. Do you still remember me? The Ice Empress and Sky Dream are also here. How are you feeling? What form are you in now? Hui Yuhao realized that he couldn't probe any further. She was evidently more interested in the eggshell. She was also moving her hands more quickly, as if she were afraid that Hui Yuhao would snatch them away from her. She finished eating the eggshell rapidly. What do I do? Hui Yuhao was at a loss. She was very cute, but he was shocked by the way she ate. That was because the eggshell evidently contained highly condensed spiritual power. He even suspected that she would try to feast on his spiritual power after finishing the eggshell. After that, when is she going to be full? Yaya, she shouted at him suddenly. He was stunned to find out that he could understand her even though she wasn't speaking any language he knew. She called him Daddy. He was stunned. He was still very young, but she had called him Daddy. Moreover, he felt as if she were throwing a tantrum, which melted his heart. Are you calling me? Hui Yuhao asked a silly question. Yaya. Daddy, he was completely lost and didn't know how to respond. She was a cute, infant version of the Snow Empress. Was she still the same third strongest soul beast on the continent? At this point, she seemed a little annoyed. She floated into the air and flew down towards him. He grabbed hold of her subconsciously, and felt an affectionate aura circulating through his body. His body was dyed with a layer of orange gold. She laughed and pounded his chest with her hands. She seemed to be playing with him. Looking at her from such a close distance, he could feel the irresistible cuteness radiating from her. Yaya. Daddy, I want to go out. After sending him this message, she squirmed out from his arms, and a small, fitting undergarment appeared on her body. As she flew forward, she revealed her tiny butt from the back. Before he could even react, his spiritual sea started to surge tremendously. Following this, her figure flashed, and she disappeared. She can leave? He was stunned, and quickly tried to return to his original body. He opened his eyes. Yaya. He heard her furious cries as he regained his awareness. As he opened his eyes, he saw a green barrier inside the room. She was engulfed in a ball of orange gold light. She couldn't break out no matter how hard she tried, and was evidently furious. What's going on? While she couldn't break free, she caused both Niu Qian and Tai Tan to be a little panicky. They only saw his third eye shining brightly before she flew out of it. She was really too cute, and the two sect masters were very curious. However, she was very hostile when she saw the two of them. As she shrieked, she started a huge snowstorm in the room. Yes, she had started a snowstorm. At this point, the temperature in the room outside the green light had fallen by about 50 degrees. The entire room was covered in snow. Frost had also formed on Niu Qian and Tai Tan's bodies. If Niu Qian hadn't been quick enough to trap her, they didn't know what else she was capable of. They could sense an intense hostility from her. Yaya. Daddy, they are bad guys. Beat them up. She was enraged as she flew and sat on his shoulder. She even extended her finger to point at Niu Qian's nose and twisted her lips. However, her tender, red lips made her seem very good-looking. Hua Yuhao was amused as he said, "Snow Lady, I shall call you Snow Lady. They aren't enemies." The Snow Lady was stunned for a moment and then appeared to be very unhappy. Niu Qian laughed. Yuhao, ask her to retract her powers. Look at the mess she made. Hua Yuhao possessed the ultimate ice, and thus he wasn't sensitive to extreme cold. At this moment, Niu Qian also retracted his soul power, and Hua Yuhao watched as the entire room turned into a world of snow. Snow Lady. Hua Yuhao was a little annoyed as he looked at her, but he couldn't say anything to scold her. At this point, she did something that made them all cringe. She lowered her head in indignation and poked herself with her index fingers. She wore a look of indignation, as if they had dared say she had done something wrong. All right. She didn't do it intentionally. She's still so young. How can we blame her? Tai Tan, who was initially very wary of Hua Yuhao, appeared very fatherly now. He stepped in front of Hua Yuhao and looked at the Snow Lady up close before laughing foolishly. As a huge and burly person who was more than 2 meters tall, he didn't think of how he looked when he laughed. The Snow Lady suddenly lifted her head as he got closer to her. Her deep blue eyes revealed a strange and distorted deep blue glow. The light flashed, and Tai Tan was turned into an ice sculpture. Snow Lady! Hua Yuhao exclaimed and picked her up as they retreated to the side of the room. He wasn't afraid of her harming Tai Tan, because he could sense the link between their powers when she made her move. However, her abilities were inferior to his by default. This meant that the abilities she unleashed would never surpass his own capabilities. Indeed, Tai Tan managed to break free from the ice as Hua Yuhao backed off. The broken pieces of ice fell onto the ground, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at her. He said helplessly, "Little fellow, I've no intention of harming you." Against such a small kid, what could they possibly do? They couldn't hit or scold her, idiot. She was scared off by your ugly mug. Niu Qian pulled Tai Tan behind him. Tai Tan was very displeased. Elder brother, my abilities are indeed inferior to yours. However, our appearances are around the same, they are nothing special. Why don't you say you're the one who scared her? Niu Qian glared at him and said, neither of us should be going over and scaring her. They didn't act like they were the Clear Sky sect masters from their cautious behavior. At this moment, Hua Yuhao also recovered from his shock. He lifted his hand and touched the Snow Lady's shoulder. She was evidently very attached to him. As he extended his hand, she immediately wrapped her hand around his finger and laughed non-stop. He could sense that she wasn't a solid entity. While her hand was soft and gentle, it didn't feel like a human hand. However, she didn't seem like she was made purely of energy. It was an unclear feeling. She was like a special existence between a solid entity and energy. You how? This is the life that all of you created? She was originally a soul beast? Niu Qian asked curiously. Hui Yuhao nodded and said, teacher said that the snow lady was an ice sky snow lady formed from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. She's a special type of soul beast, and might not even be considered a soul beast. In fact, I also don't know what made her ice sky snow lady. Both Niu Qian and Tai Tan were shocked as they heard his words. They looked at each other before they said in unison, Snow Empress? Hui Yuhao was stunned as he replied, so you know her. Tai Tan lost his voice as he said, how could we not know her? She's one of the 10 great savage beasts of the Doluo continent and has lived for 600,000 or 700,000 years. She's one of the most powerful soul beasts. She has turned into this? What's going on? Hui Yuhao knew that some things couldn't be concealed forever. After pondering for a moment, he recounted how he had discovered the Snow Empress embryo and managed to absorb it into his body by sealing it with the help of his teacher. However, he didn't reveal his secrets regarding Skydream and the Ice Empress. After listening to his recounting of events, the two sect masters were in disbelief. Surely this wasn't luck, since he almost lost his life because of it, but the Snow Empress' strength had helped him greatly. Subconsciously, they reckoned that the enhancement of his martial soul was due to the Snow Empress. In addition, there was still the infant Snow Lady now. Niu Qian pointed at the Snow Lady and asked, did your teacher mention what kind of life form the current Snow Empress is? Hui Yuhao laughed bitterly and shook his head. He replied, he didn't know what kind of life form the Snow Empress' strength would become after this all developed. He only told me that the newborn Snow Empress would be tightly connected to me. That's because a large amount of my spiritual power and blood are fused into her body. With that, a contract, and the Snow Empress' original strength and spiritual sense, this new life form was born. He called her Spirit. The Snow Empress Spirit. Spirit was an entirely new existence not only to these two sect masters, but also to the entire Doluo continent. Interrupting their conversation, the Snow Lady started to shriek again. Her crisp voice sounded very anxious, and drew their attention. The Snow Lady drifted from his shoulder, and tears flowed from her huge eyes. She stared at him before saying, "Yi again. Hui Yuhao was completely confused. No place for you? What do you mean? Can you be a bit clearer? She was pointed at him while she sobbed before starting to draw circles in the air. He was suddenly enlightened. Are you talking about soul rings? You want something to do with my soul rings? She nodded her head hurriedly, and her silvery white hair swayed slightly. Her chubby face also trembled a little. It was extremely cute. Yi, are you saying that there's no empty soul ring spot for you to control? He started to understand what she was saying. However, how was she going to control his soul rings? He was completely clueless. Snow Lady, hear me out. My cultivation is currently rank 50. Logically speaking, there should be space for a soul ring. How is there no place for you? She shook her head and started to Yi again. What? One is not enough? Hui Yuhao was stunned as he said, are you saying that your powers will fall if there aren't sufficient soul ring spots for you? You need my powers to ensure the growth and stability of your powers, but I already have 4 soul rings. I can't possibly sacrifice them. I have no choice either. Hui Yuhao was put in a spot, idiot. Tai Tan couldn't help but mutter. Rascal, you really are dumb. Others couldn't do anything if they were in such a situation, but you have twin martial souls. Don't tell me that your second martial soul also has 4 soul rings. You can't be that much of a fool. An orange gold ring appeared without warning and moved rhythmically along with the red soul ring. Orange gold soul ring? That little fellow turned into a soul ring? Niu Qian and Tai Tan were feeling down at this point. Although the Snow Lady wasn't very friendly towards the both of them, she was still very cute. No one could resist her. Moreover, she hadn't really harmed them. However, since when could a soul master possess an orange gold soul ring? What was going on? Before their shock and disappointment faded away, another orange gold ring appeared from Hui Yuhao's body. It queued behind the previous soul ring and moved along with it. The intensity of the light from both soul rings were the same. Hui Yuhao's aura also became stronger and stronger. Tai Tan was confused as he asked, Elder brother, what's going on? Why are there 2 soul rings? Niu Qian replied, how would I know? However, didn't the Brett just say that one soul ring spot wasn't enough for her? I'm wondering what she's trying to do. I wonder what kind of effect her soul rings can achieve. Hui Yuhao and the two sect masters had completely different sensations. As the Snow Lady fused into his body, he slowly understood the form and secret behind this Snow Lady. She was indeed a life form, one birthed from different strengths under the effect of Electrolux's contract spell. She could even be considered a true living soul ring. If soul rings were alive, they could be more proactive. While the Snow Lady had a physical body, she was also made of energy. No matter how great her strength was, it would still be depleted continuously. That was why she needed to rely on Hui Yuhao to restore her strength regardless of the presence of a contract. She might also need him to develop greater strength. However, the Snow Lady was still a being of the Dolor continent. Although she was a new existence, she couldn't completely transcend this world's laws. That was why she had to fuse with a Soul Master and his abilities even though she was alive on her own. If it were someone else, they would only have one soul ring spot to contain the Snow Lady. In that case, the Snow Lady would lose a portion of her strength. Simply speaking, it was just like how a Soul Master absorbed a soul ring from a soul beast. The Soul Master couldn't possibly obtain all the soul skills it had, and would only absorb one that was suitable for himself. But the Snow Lady was a living body, and thus naturally hoped to retain all her powers. However, she couldn't do this alone, and needed Hui Yuhao to help her fulfill this wish. That was why she needed to take up many spots. The conditions she formed under were too unique, he couldn't possibly replicate her. Even if Hui Yuhao could use the contract magic left behind by Electrolux, it still wouldn't come close to making another spirit like the Snow Empress. Besides, Soul Masters wouldn't have the necessary spiritual power to accept as many spirits as they want, or soul rings, for that matter. It was already unbelievable for a soul beast's power to be compressed several times over without combusting. And even then, there was still a need for a strong entity to sacrifice their divine sense. How could Hui Yuhao possibly replicate this? From one perspective, the Snow Empress' strength would be restricted by Hui Yuhao's abilities. From another viewpoint, she had managed to display her strength. After a third and fourth orange-gold soul ring appeared, the 4 soul rings moved along with the Ice Empress blood-red soul ring. At last, Hui Yuhao had officially become a soul king. He had even added 4 soul rings in one go. However, he felt very helpless, as he couldn't control these 4 new soul rings. They could only be controlled by the Snow Lady. The surging undulations of his soul and spiritual power started to calm down. The fusion process between the Snow Emperor spirit and Hui Yuhao was much simpler than expected. He didn't even feel any impact, he only felt greater strength being imbued into his body. In just this short period of time, he clearly sensed his body being influenced by the 4 new soul rings. Not only did his soul power increase a notch, but his bones, passageways, and spiritual power were all enhanced. The enhancement to a Soul Master after adding 4 soul rings was great. Hui Yuhao's current soul power was comparable to a Soul Emperor. Although he felt that he couldn't control his 4 new soul rings, the strength that they each gave him was equivalent to a 30,000-year soul ring. This was still in the midst of the fusion, which restricted the limits of his tolerance. The Snow Lady evidently still had a lot of strength left. She was pleased after taking up the 4 spots. The growth potential of these soul rings was immense. It was just that Hui Yuhao was slightly displeased that the Snow Lady forcefully snatched 4 spots and didn't even offer him a single soul skill. This little fellow is too domineering. What about my Ice Empress in the future? I've lost 4 soul skills just like that, it'll undoubtedly reduce my advantage of having twin martial souls. However, he couldn't bear to admonish her. He also believed the Ice Empress wouldn't say anything if she were awake. No matter what form the Snow Empress took, it was still her strength. 1 red and 4 orange soul rings surrounded Hui Yuhao's body as they moved. The Ice Jade Empress Scorpion's wild and barren aura disappeared. It was replaced with an elegant and peaceful aura that no one would find unusual. He didn't feel that he had become much stronger, but the 2 sect masters could sense the difference in his body. With their cultivations, they felt a sense of danger from him, a sense of danger they hadn't felt before. As a crisp and clear laugh sounded, a small and swift orange-gold figure crawled out of Hui Yuhao's Eye of Destiny. It was the Snow Lady. The 2 sect masters were surprised when they saw her appearing again. Titan said, "Kid, didn't she turn into your soul rings?" Hui Yuhao answered this question on behalf of the Snow Lady. He laughed bitterly. "She didn't turn into soul rings, but marked her territory in my body." The soul rings were just places for her to contain and consolidate her strength. She could use these 4 soul rings to restore her energy that was depleted. Technically, they aren't really soul rings, and have nothing to do with me. The Snow Lady seemed to sense the annoyance in his voice and shook her head at him unhappily. The orange-gold light from her body became stronger and stronger. Hui Yuhao immediately sensed her intentions. Following this, the first of his 4 new soul rings lit up. The Snow Lady lifted her hand and pointed at Tai Tan. Suddenly, a deep blue light shot out from her finger. This deep blue light started to disperse as it shot out, engulfing Tai Tan completely. Tai Tan turned into an ice sculpture again. He couldn't resist it this time either. She chuckled and started clapping. This time Tai Tan was struggling even more, but his movements were much slower. It's freezing me to death. Little fellow, are you using me as an experiment? This is too absurd. Be careful, or I'm going to smack your butt. Tai Tan shivered as he tried to break out of the ice. I understand now. Hui Yuhao suddenly shouted, giving the 2 sect masters a scare. Rascal, what are you shouting for? Just because I can't bear to whack her doesn't mean I can't bear to whack you. Tai Tan glared at Hui Yuhao furiously. Hui Yuhao didn't even seem to hear his threat, and said agitatedly, I understand the secret behind spirit. Although the Snow Lady has taken up 4 soul rings, they also represent 4 of her abilities. The secret lies in the storage of her strength within these soul rings, and that she can use them to restore her strength. All these have nothing to do with me. Why are you so happy if they have nothing to do with you? Tai Tan asked doubtfully. Hui Yuhao replied, it means that the depletion of my soul and spiritual power will be very small when she unleashes her abilities. Furthermore, I don't have to control them either. During this period of time, I can use other skills to complement her powers. We can even coordinate through our spiritual senses. The 2 sect masters were very powerful, and they immediately understood what he meant. Niu Qian said, in that case, there's now 2 of you with her around? Hui Yuhao shook his head and said, it's not that exaggerated. However, I believe that she can increase my fighting strength by 30% if she's there to assist me or aid me in my offense. However, we need to become more familiar with each other before she'll be able to help me effectively. Niu Qian was also surprised and said, it's not that simple. Since she's connected to you and has her own thoughts, she can even leave your body to unleash her abilities. This spirit is much superior to soul rings. Just like we thought, she might be able to change the relationship between soul beasts and soul masters, as well as change the cultivation of all soul masters on the continent. What you have to do next is familiarize yourself with her and discover her special characteristics. You'll definitely also need to practice how to coordinate with her, alright? Hui Yuhao nodded emphatically. He was filled with excitement. When a new form of life or energy was discovered, there were too many things to explore. As he looked at the Snow Lady on his shoulder, he felt his heart soften. He sighed to himself. Who would have expected the leader of the 3 heavenly kings in the extreme north to end up like this? The 5 soul rings, 1 red and 4 orange, surrounded Hui Yuhao's body. He was filled with confidence due to the unprecedented strength he had obtained. Freednovel.cm, Snow Lady, can you return? He said to the Snow Lady. She nodded, and her face rippled with a tender glow. She turned into a streak of orange-gold light that disappeared into his Eye of Destiny. She was different from the Ice Empress and Skydream Ice Worm. When she entered his body, it was like coming home. She moved freely in his second mental sea and spiritual sea. She could go anywhere she wanted. He could sense where she was, but he couldn't control her. However, he could contact her if he wanted to. They were telepathically connected in a relationship like a father and daughter. Hey, don't let her return. Call her out for me to see. She's too cute. I'm tempted to remove a few soul rings to make one just like her. Tai Tan looked indignantly at Hui Yuhao as he twisted his hands. Niu Qian glared at his brother. You want to be an ice sculpture forever? Continue with your bullshit then. Let's go, Yuhao needs to rest. You'll see her again when he manages to coordinate with her. As he spoke, he forcefully dragged his brother away. Hui Yuhao indeed had to sense the changes in his body carefully after truly fusing with the Snow Lady's spirit. After sending off the 2 sect masters, he quickly returned to his bed and sat cross-legged. He focused his mind and circulated his soul power. After he combined his consciousness and the mysterious heaven technique soul power, he suddenly felt very clear. Due to his fusion with the Snow Empress, the problems with his spiritual sea had already been resolved. His spiritual power had risen instead of fallen. His entire spiritual sea was back in its boundless ocean state. The Snow Lady swam in his spiritual sea, occasionally exuding orange-gold light. Hu Hao could sense that a part of the origin energy of heaven and earth would fuse into the Snow Lady's body as he cultivated, nourishing her. This outpouring of energy wouldn't affect his cultivation speed. On the contrary, the speeds he cultivated at the mysterious heaven technique were faster with her presence. Apart from the portion of the energy the Snow Lady absorbed, his own cultivation speed increased significantly. Furthermore, he had become a Soul King after gaining a 5th soul ring. Although his soul power was still a little rigid in his body, its overall circulation surged more and more. The inside of his body was completely engulfed in gold. It wasn't just from the mysterious heaven technique, but also his spiritual power. He could sense that his body was changing drastically under the effect of his immense soul and spiritual power. It was as if he was evolving. He wasn't sure how long this would last, but he hoped that it would last forever. As his body evolved, his tolerance level would also increase. His spiritual sea felt as if it was growing due to the Snow Lady's spiritual power, but that feeling would disappear as his body got stronger. After fusing with the Snow Lady's spirit, there was only one word to describe Hu Hao's condition: metamorphosis. Hu Hao spent an entire day in deep meditation. When he opened his eyes again, the sky was already bright. The metamorphosis of his body was still ongoing, but its speed had dropped significantly. He jumped off from his bed and stretched. He only heard his bones cracking softly, and he was stunned to find out that he had grown taller. There were even lesser striations on his developed muscles, but the changes to his skin were far more astonishing. He had obtained a healthy, bronze complexion after years of tireless cultivation. Although this complexion made him seem very masculine, he had neglected skin care due to his hectic schedule of cultivation, which made his skin seem rough. After one day and night of cultivation, he was stunned to realize that his complexion had whitened a little. Although he was still bronze, there was a layer of dim light beneath his skin. This made the surface of his skin appear finer and smoother. The signs of aging that had accumulated had all disappeared. Am I seeing things? This was his first reaction. He rushed to the washroom and looked at himself in the mirror. He was stunned. He couldn't even believe that he was the person in the mirror. It was still the same Hu Hao. However, his body and face seemed to have experienced some slight but weird changes. It was these slight changes that had caused his appearance to change. The lines on his face had become more obvious, and they were now filled with a masculine aura. In his eyes, his calm gaze revealed a sense of dignity. His skin was indeed smooth, but it was different from a young girl's skin. His skin was filled with a healthy, masculine aura. At least to him, he felt that he had become more handsome after this change. He faced the mirror and couldn't help but ask himself, is this still me? This shouldn't be changes that occurred because of the increase in my cultivation. He finally understood. The Snow Lady was the reason why his appearance experienced such drastic changes. She even called me daddy, but she doesn't look like me at all. I seem to have changed because of her. As he thought of this point, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Since when could a daughter change their father's appearance? However, such a thing had happened to him. Had she despised her father because he was too ugly? Hu Hao couldn't help but laugh in the end. As he thought of something, lights flashed and the Snow Lady crawled out. However, she didn't crawl out of his eye of destiny, but his chest. Evidently, it wasn't only his body that was evolving. The Snow Lady was also becoming more and more familiar with him. Compared to the day before, the Snow Lady seemed to have grown slightly. She was still an infant, but she was even cuter now. When she saw his reflection in the mirror, she started chuckling and clapping. He was a little shy as he said, "Little fellow, did you despise me because I was ugly?" The Snow Lady shook her head, but her deep blue eyes revealed her laughing intent. He wanted to hug her, but she turned into a streak of flowing light. In this state, she could change at any time, so he grabbed onto nothing as he tried to catch her. As she opened her mouth, she sucked water from the tap in the washroom and spat it onto Hu Hao's face. While he possessed the ultimate ice, he still shivered as he was struck by the cold water. She laughed cheekily and escaped. She seemed very delighted as she flew around. Hu Hao had absolutely no idea how to deal with her. Seeing that she was so happy, he also became more relaxed. He suddenly thought of what it would be like if he really had a daughter. As he thought of it, he unwittingly thought of that figure deeply imprinted in his mind. "Wang Dong, is your twin sister fertile?" His face blushed, and his heart rate increased. After all, he was only 17 years old, and was still exploring his emotions. He didn't realize this when he was cultivating normally. However, romantic feelings had started to develop in him after he met Juzi and saw the goddess of light. Oh? The two sect masters are here. Hu Yuhao was stunned to discover that he could sense presences outside even without using his spiritual detection. He even knew who they were. Before the two of them could knock on the door, he took the initiative to open the door himself. Niu Qian smiled as he asked, "Your cultivation has ended?" As he looked at Hu Yuhao, he was slightly surprised. "Yuhao, why do I feel like you're different from yesterday?" Hu Yuhao invited both of them in and said, "Uncle Niu, I feel the same way. It seems like my body has been changing under the Snow Lady's influence after I fused with her. I'm not clear on how much it'll change. However, my body and spiritual power have become stronger. My telepathy with her has also grown. Even my skin and appearance have changed slightly, yes." Niu Qian nodded and pressed his hand on Hu Yuhao's shoulder. A gentle soul power was poured into his body, which seemed to cleanse him as it circulated one round through his passageways. He only felt a sense of warmth engulfing his body. It was extremely comfortable. Part 1 ends here.